Hey guys, Foxdrop here with a video on the most broken junglers ever to exist in League of Legends. We'll be taking a bit of a trip down memory lane for this video, guys. I've been playing League of Legends since Season 1, and I remember a lot of these things. Thinking back on them, I'm not sure how they ever were allowed to exist. I certainly can't imagine them being implemented in today's game. Then again, having said that, we actually currently have right now Cho'Gath running around one-shotting people with his feast, but still I'd say that doesn't really compare to the things that I'll be mentioning today. I'm going to try and be as objective as possible in this video, but as you can imagine, a bit of my opinion will be chucked into this as well, so you might disagree with the things that I'm saying, and if you feel like I've left something out, something that was absolutely busted, feel free to chuck it down below in the comments. So before we get cracking with the champions specifically, I feel like we should define what exactly I'm talking about when I say these junglers were broken. When I use the word broken, essentially what I'm saying is that these champions didn't really have any counterplay to them, or that they were just really unhealthy for the game. On top of that as well, they often outshone everything that was around them at the time. And lastly, stuff that led to significant changes, whether that's champion reworks, item changes, or really heavy nerfs. And most likely, we won't be seeing the spirit of these things happen again in the future. I do want to emphasize though that this is not going to be a list of junglers who are just categorically the strongest, most overpowered stuff ever to exist in League. There will be overlap obviously, but I mostly want to focus on the characteristics or the design of these things that made these champions so broken. The first one I want to mention today is Alistar in Season 2. If you played in Season 2, you would have known that junglers were essentially just a second support. You would buy Moby Boots, 2 gold per 10 items, and Oracle's Elixir, and that was essentially your core build. If you're lucky, you'd have an Aegis of the Legion on top of that, but probably nothing else. Half of that build doesn't even exist anymore. Oracle's Elixir, if you don't know what that was, it was a 400 gold potion that stayed on you until you died, and while you had it up, you could see all invisible units, including, and specifically, this is why you bought it, for wards. So essentially you'd run around and any ward that was down, you just stomp it. The double gold per 10 items specifically were Philosopher's Stone and Heart of Gold. These items gave you pretty crap stats by themselves, but they allowed you to generate gold every 10 seconds. This meant that you could fuel your supporty playstyle, get more oracles if you died, stack up on wards, because it was a pretty bloody good joke if you thought that you were going to get farm as the jungler, or you thought you were going to be able to carry. Now Alistar was not the only champion who would use this build. He was far from the only support jungler in Season 2. Most notably, you'd have people like Maokai and Skarner who would also use this build. But the reason why I'm listing Alistar specifically is because I feel like when this was the height, the peak, the optimal jungle playstyle, Alistar was so hard to play against because he didn't need items in the slightest. Obviously, any jungler that was viable in this meta was pretty good without items, but Alistar just really takes the cake. If Alistar ever comes meta as a jungler again, you'll probably understand just how frustrating it is to play against him, especially if you're a mid laner. And the reason for that was because nowhere was safe if you're playing versus Ali. Usually, if you're sitting by your tower, you're pretty safe, but not versus Alistar. He'd walk up behind you, headbutt you out your tower, pulverize you. He wouldn't even die because he's got his ultimate up to protect him as well. This is also in the days where trinkets weren't a thing, so as a laner you probably wouldn't have vision to stop this happening either. All in all, Alistar suited this meta and this playstyle extremely well, and he was very, very hard to play against. The next most broken jungler in League of Legends history is Pre-rework Rengar. I'm not talking about the most recent rework he had, I'm talking about before he had any reworks. Essentially, imagine Rengar how he is now, except you had absolutely no indication that he was about to jump out of you with his ultimate. He had 10 times the burst, his E was point and click, so there was absolutely no skill involved in that whatsoever. And just in general, the weaknesses that Rengar has now weren't really a thing back then. He was still moderately vulnerable in the really early game. His jungle clears weren't the healthiest, but he had so much damage, especially in the 1v1s, that unless you proper caught him with his pants down, you wouldn't be able to beat him. He also had something called the triple Q combo, which was insane burst damage. His Q worked a lot different to how it does now, right? Essentially, it's like a Jax W. It was like an enhanced auto attack, and you could manipulate your ferocity in such a way where you could get 3 of these enhanced auto attacks off, including one of them being empowered from his 5-stack ferocity. There was just absolutely no counterplay to this whatsoever, and you had no indication that he was even coming towards you when he was in his ultimate. So he just appeared completely out of nowhere, bish bash bosh, you're dead. If you thought Rengar now was annoying to play against, you should try playing versus him in Season 3. Coming up next, another ridiculously broken jungler who benefited from a ridiculously broken build, Madstone Udyr. If you guys were around during the Trick 2G days, you probably would have seen a lot of this flying about. This build was around in Season 3 and it involved stacking the Madred's Razor and the Spirit Stone, hence the name Madstone, so you get both the benefits of those items. If you don't know what those items were, they were essentially the jungle items for the auto attackers and the spellcasters respectively. So if you were someone like Xin or Ivern, you'd want to go Madreds. If you were someone like Elise or Zac, you'd go Spirit Stone. However, Udyr, being Udyr, a very unique champion, got really good benefits out of both of these items. And technically speaking, any champion in the game could have stacked Spirit Stone and Madreds and got that benefit, but no one really made use of it in the way that Udyr did. Essentially, by stacking these two items, what you could do was have the most efficient jungle clear ever. You didn't take any damage, you cleared them really fast. And this was so good not just because it gave you huge advantages over the enemy jungler in levels and gold, but it also meant that you unlocked your Feral Flare extremely early. Feral Flare was an item that built out of Madreds, and after a certain amount of stacks, it would unlock. You got these stacks by killing enemy players, but you also got them from clearing jungle camps. And once you'd unlocked the Feral Flare, you got a huge boost in damage. Feral Flare was one of these items that really wasn't that good until you'd unlocked it, so it's kind of balanced around the fact that you were kind of weak until you had the stacks. And it was also balanced around the fact that you probably wouldn't unlock the Feral Flare until a little bit later on into the game. Of course, Madstone Udyr completely broke that down and got Feral Flare extremely fast. And this meant that right from very early on, he was very powerful. As it turned out, most other junglers in the game could not keep up with Udyr with this build, and eventually it was changed so that you couldn't stack Spirit Stone with Madreds. Moving on to the next jungler today, guys. This is probably one of the most overpowered junglers we've ever seen. This is Release Xin Zhao. At his initial release, Xin Zhao was extremely powerful. I'm talking like one of the most powerful champions ever. Not only did Xin Zhao have absolutely bonkers amount of damage, he also had some insane sustain and an unhealthy amount of free defensive stats from his ulti. So if you're fighting Xin, you're going up against someone who would kill you extremely fast, would not take that much damage, and would sustain all of it back up. Release Xin Zhao is by no means the only champion who was ridiculously busted on his release. Jax, for example, had to be removed from the game while they fixed him after his release. Nasus was released with a typo in his AP scaling on his ultimate, which made him crazy strong. And of course, LeBlanc as well was hotfixed shortly after her release. But I'm mentioning Xin here because none of the other champions really matched him as far as his jungle prowess goes, because Xin's sustain was just disgusting. Like, he legit did not take damage while he was clearing the jungle, and back then there were much fewer jungle monsters to kill in the jungle camps compared to nowadays, so single target clearers such as Xin had a much better time of things. But now moving on to the last champion that I want to talk about today, one of the most broken champions in League of Legends history, surprisingly, Ivern. Now this might get a lot of hate because, you know, he's quite recent, he's kind of new, and you guys might be thinking I'm just saying this because of recency bias or something. But I'm someone who's played since Season 1, I've experienced a lot of different stuff, and I have to say playing versus Ivern is a very unique experience. Like, I don't want to say that Ivern's one of the most overpowered champions in League of Legends history, I would not make that argument, but like I said at the beginning of this video, broken does not necessarily mean overpowered and really strong. I feel like Ivern's mechanics are really unhealthy for the game, and there's not much counterplay against him. Like, even wards versus Ivern do absolutely nothing because he takes away your camps extremely fast. And he's actually pretty good at taking away this stuff right from under your nose as well, because you can't even attack the jungle camp to stop him from channeling his passive. You have to attack him. And if you're a melee champion, sometimes it's actually not that easy to do, to run around the camp to smack him around the mouth. When you combine that with the fact that Ivern has the lowest need for gold and items than any jungler in the modern League of Legends era, I would say this is really only comparable to champions in Season 2, then you can kind of see what I mean by Ivern being pretty bloody broken. Like, for all intents and purposes, Ivern just breaks the jungle game. Since he's come into the league, he's been extremely difficult to balance. Since he's been meta, he's been nerfed constantly over and over and over. And I also strongly feel like Ivern is one of these champions whose design is something we probably won't see again. But then again, maybe you just disagree with me. After all, this is pretty much just my opinion. So let me know what you thought about this video down below. I don't usually do videos like this. I like to focus a lot more on, you know, current affairs and teaching you guys how to be better players. But I thought this might be kind of fun to do. I was thinking about this, you know, like I say, I've experienced a lot of this stuff. So it was kind of an interesting experience to take a trip down memory lane. But either way, guys, let me know what you thought about this video. If you liked it, cheeky thumbs up, and you can subscribe to me for more League of Legends content. Don't forget to go give me a follow at Twitter at FoxdropLol and on Twitch /Foxdrop. Those links are down below in the description, boys and girls. But most importantly, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in my next video. Show